Good evening, everyone. I hope this message finds you in a quiet moment, because what you're about to hear will shatter that quiet completely. Tonight, we're diving into a story that tears through the carefully constructed silence surrounding African news. A story where a man trained to save lives is suddenly ordered to take up arms. A story where the tools of healing become instruments of national defense. And if you think you've heard it all, stay with me, because the reality behind this is more shocking than anything the mainstream media will ever show you. When the letter arrived at Dr. Haruna Lure's doorstep, it sent tremors through every corner of Burkina Faso. This wasn't a hospital transfer. This wasn't a medical conference invitation. This was a military draft notice, a summons to the front lines of a war most Americans don't even know is happening. Dr. Lure, a respected anesthesiologist, a man whose entire career was built on precision, care, and the delicate art of keeping patients safe during their most vulnerable moments, was now being told to prepare for combat. Let that sink in for a moment. A doctor called to war. And if that shakes you, if that sends a chill down your spine, then you need to hear the rest of this story, because Dr. Lure's draft notice wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't a bureaucratic error or a dramatic exception meant to grab headlines. It was a declaration, a signal that under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso has entered an entirely new era, one where every citizen, regardless of profession, education, or status, is now part of the national defense apparatus. For Americans over 60 watching this moment carries echoes of another time when duty and personal freedom collided in the furnace of national crisis. Echoes of draft boards, lottery numbers, and envelopes that arrived in the mail and changed everything overnight. But there's a critical difference here. What's happening in Burkina Faso isn't about fighting a distant war in someone else's jungle. This is about survival. This is about a nation fighting to reclaim its own sovereignty, inch by bloody inch, against forces that want to tear it apart. And before we go deeper into this unfolding storm, take just a second, only if you feel the weight of what's happening here, and hit that subscribe button. Because what follows next may fundamentally change how you see the future of West Africa. And trust me, the mainstream outlets won't tell you this story. Not like this. When Dr. Haruna Lure's draft notice went public, many people thought it was a one-off shock, a dramatic case designed to make waves. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Because Dr. Lure's summons was not an anomaly. It was a signal flare. A warning shot fired across the bow of every citizen in Burkina Faso, announcing that the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. To understand just how explosive this moment truly is, we need to rewind to 2023, to the legislation that reshaped an entire nation. Law 029 to 2023, the National Patriotic Service. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't a voluntary program encouraging civic engagement. This was a legal mandate that redefined what it means to be a citizen of Burkina Faso. The law is brutally simple and utterly comprehensive. Every Burkinabe between the ages of 18 and 35 must serve 12 months. No exceptions based on profession. No exemptions for education level. Men, women, doctors, engineers, farmers, accountants, students, everyone falls under this sweeping mandate. For a nation already grappling with one of the deadliest insurgencies in the entire Sahel region, this law repositioned the entire country as a mobilized defensive shield. But here's what the Western media won't tell you. Traoré didn't frame this as desperation. He framed it as sovereignty. His message to his people was clear, uncompromising, and electrifying. Burkina Faso will defend itself with its own people, with its own hands, on its own terms. And for many inside Burkina Faso's borders, especially the youth who had grown tired of watching foreign military forces come and go with promises that never materialized, this message resonated like thunder. They saw the National Patriotic Service not as oppression, but as opportunity. A chance to reclaim their dignity. A chance to rewrite the narrative that outsiders had been writing about their homeland for decades. But for others, particularly educated professionals who had built lives around routines far removed from military service, the mandate stirred deep fear. Dr. Haruna Lure became their symbol. A man critical of the government, a respected physician suddenly told to trade his surgical scrubs for combat fatigues. His case crystallized a question burning in the minds of millions. Where does national duty end? And where does personal liberty begin? Traoré's answer was unambiguous. In a nation fighting for its very survival, liberty is shaped by necessity. Every life has value, and every life must contribute to preserving the whole. The National Patriotic Service wasn't thrown together hastily. It was engineered with precision that rivals any military operation. The structure was systematic, comprehensive, and uncompromising in its reach. Civil servants were legally required to report eligible individuals within their departments. Private companies were bound by law to cooperate fully with mobilization efforts. Universities, long considered sanctuaries from national service obligations, suddenly found themselves equally accountable. Even students finishing their national exams faced a new reality. Before entering higher education, they would undergo patriotic immersion, a civic-military training phase designed to instill the values Traoré considered essential for the nation's future. This wasn't random conscription. This was a blueprint for total defense. Yet beneath the iron framework, there was unexpected flexibility. Contrary to what you'll read in European newspapers or hear from Western human rights organizations, the Burkinabe government didn't blindly drain the nation of its brightest minds. Doctors like Haruna Lure were often reassigned to civilian posts, where their expertise could strengthen infrastructure without completely removing them from their professional calling. Engineers were deployed to reinforce electrical grids damaged by conflict. Teachers trained recruits in essential skills. Energy specialists worked on projects vital to national resilience. This adaptive model, exemptions, partial deployments, service transfers, revealed a level of strategic planning that Western coverage systematically ignores. Because acknowledging this nuance would complicate the narrative they want to tell about Africa. Still, the shock of mandatory service rippled through Burkinabe society like an earthquake. In marketplaces, conversations crackled with nervous energy. Who will be called next? Will my son be pulled from school? Will my daughter be sent north to the conflict zones? With each whispered question came another realization. The age of sitting on the sidelines was over. And here's what startled American analysts watching African news: the speed. The acceleration with which Traoré moved the machinery of state. One signature on one decree, and overnight, millions of citizens found themselves standing in a completely new national reality. For those of you in your 60s watching this echoes memories of draft boards and lottery systems during Vietnam and the Cold War. But remember the difference. Traoré's mobilization isn't based on foreign intervention or geopolitical chess games. It's based on reclaiming internal sovereignty. His argument is devastatingly simple. Burkina Faso must defend its land, its villages, its families, without relying on foreign powers whose motivations don't align with the nation's survival. The moment Dr. Haruna Lure's draft letter became public knowledge, an emotional shockwave surged through Burkina Faso. For the first time, citizens saw this policy not as abstract legislation, but as something that could reach into their living rooms, their workplaces, their families. And that moment ignited something unexpected. Inside training camps from Ouagadougou to Kaya, something remarkable happened. Instead of resentment and resistance, thousands of young recruits began expressing a level of loyalty that stunned even hardened military analysts. Chants erupted, not forced, not staged, but rising naturally from men and women who believed they were answering a historic call. "We are here for Burkina. We are here for Traoré." These weren't superficial slogans. These were battle vows, built on genuine conviction. Officers who had trained recruits for decades admitted they had never witnessed such unity among fresh trainees. This wasn't loyalty manufactured through propaganda. This was loyalty forged through years of frustration, years of watching villages fall, years of seeing foreign armies make promises that never delivered results. To these young people, Ibrahim Traoré represented something unprecedented, a leader who stopped waiting for outside rescue and dared to reclaim their destiny with their own hands. The Tactical Air Guidance Forces, known for their precision and discipline, became the loudest voice in this wave of national loyalty. At graduation ceremonies, young men who had once questioned the state's future began pledging allegiance not just to Burkina Faso as a concept, but directly to the captain leading it. They saw Traoré not as a distant politician behind bulletproof glass, but as a soldier who walked the same dusty roads, ate the same rations, and risked the same bullets. For them, the National Patriotic Service wasn't a burden. It was a badge of honor. But while the barracks buzzed with energy, the country's urban centers felt a different vibration. Among professionals, journalists, administrators, and medical workers, unease spread like fog. Some feared the policy would pull essential talent away from critical institutions. Others questioned the government's legal right to compel service so broadly. And a few, unwilling to accept conscription, quietly slipped out of the country or applied for asylum abroad. These departures were small in number but massive in political impact. International media seized on every case, amplifying them as evidence of repression. Headlines in European and American outlets began repeating the same phrase like a mantra. Burkina Faso's forced conscription sparks human rights concerns. End quote. Western commentators painted the mobilization as authoritarian, conveniently ignoring the voluntary surge happening simultaneously on the ground. Traoré's government responded not with apologies or justifications, but with firmness. Avoiding service without a valid exemption became a prosecutable offense. The state launched campaigns to track individuals who failed to report. But interestingly, officials didn't publicly shame them. Instead, the messaging focused on community responsibility. You are needed. You are expected. We rise together, or we fall together. This firm stance generated two powerful effects. First, it stopped the trickle of avoidance attempts cold. But second, and far more important, it validated the sacrifice of those who had already stepped forward. Their discipline was honored. Their commitment was recognized. They were no longer merely citizens following orders. They were patriots rising while others fled. Here's where we move beyond emotion and into cold, hard facts. The results of the National Patriotic Service speak for themselves. More than 3,000 citizens completed civic and patriotic training programs. Over 2,000 civil servants underwent military immersion courses. More than 600 trainees acquired vocational skills essential for rebuilding national infrastructure. These aren't abstract statistics. They produced tangible change on the ground. The government regained control over contested territories. Local leaders in previously unstable regions confirmed improved security conditions. Territory under government control rose from 70.89% to 7% in just months. Critics argued the data was exaggerated, but village elders, community representatives, and local leaders told a different story. Security had genuinely improved. Cooperation between civilians and military forces had strengthened. Fear, while not eliminated, was slowly retreating. And that's something statistics alone cannot capture: the cultural shift. Young people began talking about the flag not as a design, but as a responsibility. The once abstract idea of citizenship now had weight, sweat, and sacrifice attached to it. Neighborhoods once known for disengagement saw youth volunteering for civilian defense groups. In places where despair once defined daily life, the sense of unity grew like a new root, finding soil after a long drought. But unity has a shadow. Inside this rising national cohesion, tensions still brewed. Families worried about losing their children. Employers feared skilled labor shortages. Small businesses wondered how long they could sustain operations under rotating deployments. International organizations raised alarms about human rights. Opposition figures warned of creeping authoritarianism. And Traoré? He listened, but he did not bend. Instead, he refined, adjusted, tightened the legal framework to punish evasion, but expanded the pathways for service that maintained economic continuity. His message was consistent. No one is above duty, but every citizen will serve where they are needed most. This balance, unyielding but adaptive, slowly transformed initial resistance into reluctant respect. Even some critics admitted that the state, for the first time in years, felt present, engaged, alive. From the outside, The National Patriotic Service might look like an internal African policy, but to global powers, especially the United States, what's unfolding in Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traore is a strategic earthquake, a geopolitical alarm bell, a shift with consequences that ripple far beyond the Sahel. For American viewers over 60, men who remember Cold War anxieties and domino theories, this moment carries familiar weight. Because the Sahel isn't just another unstable region, it's now considered the epicenter of global jihadist activity, more active than the Middle East, more volatile than Afghanistan. Every mile of territory Traoré reclaims, every new recruit he trains, every shift in national doctrine sends signals through intelligence communities worldwide. The United States watches with conflicted eyes. On one hand, Washington values stability. A mobilized, unified Burkina Faso theoretically reduces regional vulnerability to extremist expansion. On paper, that's a win. But in practice, there's the Russia factor. Moscow's influence has grown across the Sahel, and the more Traoré emphasizes sovereignty and rejects Western oversight, the more analysts fear Burkina Faso could align with a Eurasian security orbit rather than an American one. For U.S. strategists, that's no small matter. It challenges AFRICOM's influence. It reconfigures alliances. It alters the balance in one of the world's most strategically overlooked regions. Europe, especially France, views Traoré's policies with visible discomfort. For them, Burkina Faso represents a former sphere of influence, slipping away, redefining itself without European permission. Traoré's unapologetic stance against foreign interference has already caused diplomatic waves. And when a young leader in West Africa successfully reshapes national identity, other nations take notice. Mali, Niger, Guinea, each with their own grievances, see a model they could replicate. For Europe, that's a geopolitical headache with long-term consequences. But the American reaction is the most complex. Policymakers wonder whether Traoré represents stability or unpredictability. Is he building a stronger ally against extremism, or forging a nationalist movement that will challenge Western interests? Is he an independent reformer, or a symbol of the global South pushing back against decades of outside intervention? These questions remain unanswered, and uncertainty in geopolitics is a force more potent than any weapon. Intelligence assessments describe Burkina Faso as a nation undergoing rapid militarized cohesion, a phrase that signals both opportunity and risk. If Traoré succeeds in stabilizing the country through internal mobilization, he will shift the entire security architecture of the Sahel. If he fails, the collapse could be equally historic. To Washington, this is not background noise. It is a developing storyline in a region where great powers now compete quietly but aggressively. And as the U.S. analyzes each statistic, each decree, each territorial gain, one conclusion grows clearer. Burkina Faso is no longer a passive player. It is writing its own doctrine, and the world has no choice but to adapt. The road ahead for Burkina Faso isn't smooth, predictable, or guaranteed. What Ibrahim Traoré has unleashed is more than policy. It's national metamorphosis, a transformation that could cement the country as a sovereign force in West Africa or expose it to pressures strong enough to fracture everything he's building. The National Patriotic Service has momentum, but momentum is not immunity. Every nation that attempts total mobilization walks a razor's edge. On one side lies stability, identity, and collective power. On the other, exhaustion, economic strain, and the risk that discipline becomes overreach. Burkina Faso now walks that line with the entire world watching. In the coming years, three forces will determine the nation's trajectory. First is endurance. Mobilization demands commitment not for months, but for generations. Traoré's administration must maintain morale not only through patriotism, but through tangible progress, safer villages, stronger institutions, growing opportunities for youth. If the people see results, the system will hold. If not, fatigue could creep in, slowly eroding the unity forged under fire. Second is economic resilience. The most disciplined army cannot fight if the nation behind it falters. Burkina Faso's ability to balance military training, civilian productivity, and infrastructure rebuilding will be the true test. The service transfer system is clever, but stretched too far. Even clever systems snap. Third is external pressure. Global powers are already calculating how a stronger Burkina Faso affects their interests. Whether through diplomacy, sanctions, partnerships, or covert influence, the world will not remain neutral. Traoré will need to navigate these pressures like a captain steering through a storm, firm, flexible, and impossible to intimidate. Yet inside all these risks lies a possibility few dare to speak aloud. Burkina Faso could redefine what sovereignty means for an entire continent. If this model succeeds, it becomes a blueprint. If it fails, it becomes a warning. For now, the country marches forward, determined, defiant, and unwilling to wait for permission from anyone. The story of Burkina Faso's National Patriotic Service began with a single letter, one envelope delivered to one man, a doctor, a healer. Dr. Haruna Lure, a man who spent his life easing pain, suddenly asked to stand where pain is born. That moment shocked a nation. It shocked the world. And it forced millions to ask whether Ibrahim Traoré was pushing Burkina Faso toward salvation or toward an uncharted frontier. But as we close this chapter, the truth becomes clearer. Dr. Haruna Lure was never the story. He was the mirror, a reflection of the deeper transformation underway. One where the scalpel and the rifle become tools of the same mission. One where citizenship is not simply lived, but demanded. One where a young captain redefined sovereignty as something earned through sweat, sacrifice, and discipline. Tonight, Burkina Faso stands at a crossroads. One path leads toward a nation fully awakened, unified, mobilized, and grounded in a sense of purpose not seen in decades. The other path leads towards strain, overextension, and fractures that enemies would eagerly exploit. And the world, Washington, Moscow, Paris, Beijing, is watching closely, calculating what shape this new force in West Africa might take. But here is the part that should keep every viewer alert. If a small landlocked nation can reforge itself with nothing but determination and a call to service, what happens when larger, more powerful African states take notes? What happens when a model born in the Sahel begins spreading across the continent? What happens when millions, not thousands, embrace the idea of mandatory national unity? This is not just an African experiment. It is a geopolitical tremor with the potential to reshape alliances, challenge superpowers, and force the world to redraw the map of influence in the 21st century. And if all of this shakes you, if it forces you to rethink what you thought you knew about African news, then lean in, because the next chapter under Ibrahim Traoré may be even more explosive than this one. If this story hit you like a cold wind, if it made you stop and think about just how fast the world can change, then stay with us. Subscribe now, because the events coming next will not wait for anyone, and you will want to hear them first before the ground shifts again beneath our feet.